Okay, so I am here to do a quick recap of the video from episode 3, and I just want to kind of express the story that was going on in my life. And I hope that episodes 1 through 3 kind of show that, the life of a comedian is not so cut and dry as to what you might see on stage or what you might see on a popular podcast. There's a whole lesson and a whole journey to it, and there's a whole meaning to everything. So in episode 3, I ended with what's in a name and the question being posed as to, what's in somebody's name. I hope that, I tried to keep things as raw and uncut as possible, which is why I kept whole live streams in episode 3 because, a lot of my life between 2020 in 2021, early 2021, was completely live streamed while I was on the road. And it was like a fucking wild west out there. There was nothing normal about what I was doing. And I understand that a lot of people would be like, why are you out here during a pandemic? But at the time, I didn't have a choice. I had really nowhere to live. My living situations would get very odd or very strange. And even to this day, like, has been a lesson for me as a female comic. I know a lot of male comics have stories about their lives and they sound so sexy and so glamorous and they get to go to clubs and party and stuff. But for me and a lot of women on the road, it's a very different story. So this has been kind of my journey. And leading up to this, with Kill Tony, everybody can have their own perspective. And I not only have one live stream about it, I have two. So my one live stream I put on the podcast. I have another live stream which I had originally put on all of my social media platforms, but I took down from Instagram and YouTube for a reason, because I just didn't want that kind of negativity to kind of haunt me for the rest of my life. And I also, over the years, I've done a lot of like soul searching and things like that. And I think for anybody that knows me, knows the hard work and dedication that I put into stand-up comedy. And so it's one of those things where, I faced a lot of criticism, a lot of judgment. And of course, like, you can watch the episode, go back. I've referenced things as best as I can. But it's not the only part of my comedy journey. And this vlog is to show, like, this is part of my past. And because I am an astrologer, I know that right now Venus is in retrograde. We're going into Mercury retrograde, and it is about reflecting on the past. So part of this is I'm releasing Camel Toe Strong episodes 1 through 4 to kind of go back into my past of my journey and release it and let it go. Because I know there's more journey to come, and I know that there's more journey on the way. My whole learning experience from Kill Tony was, I let you guys know what I was about to do on a live stream before I went in, because when you make a handshake contract where I come from, it's called farmer contract or horse language. And I take things like that very seriously. I might, again, like, speak your truth, even though your voice shakes. I didn't know I was going to be called up that day. I signed up as Christina Michelle for a reason. And it was not to stay on the show. It was for me to speak my piece and for me to stand up for myself. I knew in the short term, and it might be, who knows, maybe I'm blacklisted for the rest of my life from every comedy thing ever. But I don't think that's been the case, because I've had really, really amazing experiences as a comic along the way. Aside from that, and people who have come up to me all over the US in different states and said, that they support. And maybe the support is behind the scenes, but the reality is, when I shook my hand with another person's hand and made a contract, something didn't sit right in my soul after that. And I said to myself, what would you say you were a mother and you had to parent yourself in this situation and tell your daughter what to do? And I had two choices. One choice was to just never go back ever again. because I showed up for the job. That's the thing, is I went from Los Angeles, 29 Palms, California, and then I went to Texas, and I was there for a whole month before the show even started recording again. I came up there to do my job, and what I realized is somebody's ego was more important than a human being's soul. And because it was my soul, I cast it away and was like, deal with it, take your hits, take whatever. And then I realized, no, like, this is my soul journey. My soul journey is that of a female stand-up comedian. I am a comedian. I'm not here to be walked all over. And for me, this is my experience. And for other comics who have come up to me and asked me, what do I do about this show? I say, go on the show, because every comic's journey is different. Every comic's soul journey is completely different. In my case, this is a journey of me, obviously in a situation where a lot of people can judge me. A lot of people can have opinions. A lot of people can cast me aside or lead me to die, which gets me into my next section. But the reality is my blood, my sweat, my tears has been on this journey. And in many ways, in very precarious situations that are never going to be shared on this vlog. You know, I've lived, and still to this day, even in 2023, have lived in some very dangerous situations as a stand-up comedian, just trying to survive. You know, just trying to keep a roof over my head. Just trying to do what I need to do to just get on stage and be a comedian, which is what I am. And, you know, if my name hadn't have been called, would it have been different? You know, at the time, a couple people stood by me, and at the time, I lost a couple opportunities because people were like, "Don't work with the crazy woman. How dare she?" And it's like, you know, you have to understand, like, I didn't have a place to live. And right after that happened, I did the 5-hour drive to Oklahoma City. So not even in that, you know, I went right directly from Kiltony up to Oklahoma City to sleep on a couch. And that's the other part of this whole situation, that it's like people don't see the comics journey. They just see the part they want to judge while they're sitting on their toilet taking a shit and making fun of somebody. And do I understand what the show is? Absolutely. Have I fucking put it down at a roast before? Absolutely. Am I afraid to be roasted? Hell no. But what this was somebody fucking with another person's soul. And that's why I used my name, Christina Michelle, because that's my soul's name on this planet. And I'm a spiritual woman. And when you fuck with a spiritual woman, you're not just fucking with a spiritual woman, you're fucking with the divine feminine. And like I said before, this is a mother's war. And things reflect each other on a grand scale and on a very small scale. So I see this as a spiritual lesson for me to remind myself, you know, I will never forget where the fuck I came from and who the fuck I still have yet to be. And yes, we're in a world where we have to pick and choose our battles. This was a battle that if you watched before, I said, I know I'm going into battle here. I knew I was going into battle. I knew I was going into, I was there at that time. You know, it's like when you're watching, you know, the home team and then the out of town team. Obviously, I knew I was not going into home territory here. But I find it very interesting how I was spoken to and what that reflects on a grander scale on certain people's souls. So I kept my journey going. I went on the road. I went to various gigs. I drove around the United States. Between February 26th and February 28th, I had a gig in Morgan, Utah at the Stoddard Inn. And I was driving from Oklahoma City to Morgan, Utah. I slept in a small town in Wyoming at a gas station I had slept at before. And it was pretty cold because it's February. You know, I've driven in all types of conditions. I was headlining that gig and I had an amazing time. You can watch that full set. It's called Suck My Clit, and I have that online as well. And I got paid in a hotel, a meal, and then tips. So you have to understand, like, being paid on the road is great, but being paid on the road at that time, I made $68 in tips because, you know, this is what it's like. And that's how much I love this. So I was leaving that gig from the hotel, and I knew that I had just enough money to get gas to go to the next town so I can get to Oklahoma City, but I knew I didn't have enough gas to get to Oklahoma City so that I could get to some other gigs that I had, one being in Arkansas and the other being in Fort Worth in early March. So I kind of had to pace myself, and I was a Postmates, now Uber Eats driver. And so I knew that I could stop in Denver and Postmates drive at the time. It was still Postmates, the companies combined, and probably sleep at a gas station and then do some driving so I could make some money so I could get gas so I could get to Oklahoma City so I could do more driving, make more money so I could get to my gigs. And it was a sunny, bright day, and I was driving through Wyoming on Highway 80, and it's a historically not so great highway in that area, and it's through the mountains, and I was driving through black ice, and I should have stayed in Utah and just drove in Salt Lake City and made money that way, but I was too scared, and I was too scared to ask for help because along the way, I had learned that asking for help is kind of a scary thing to do. So I just kind of kept to myself and was like, you're going to figure this out. And I was driving down Highway 80, and I was on black ice, and the wind was so strong, and I had a Hyundai Elantra, and it just like tore my car over. It just like it was barely anything to move my car on that black ice. And I was in the moment where I was like, I need to pull over, but there's so many snowdrifts, I can't pull over. There's nowhere for me to pull over to like wait this out. It was bad wind. And so wind hit me. I was in the right hand lane and it hit my car, so my car was skidding like that. And an 18-wheeler was coming down in the left lane like pretty fast. I mean, they book it down. They have chains on their tires. So he was coming down this way, and all I could see out of this corner of my eye was just the front end of an 18-wheeler coming at my face in the driver's side window. And I was like, it was so slow. Time slowed down so much. And I just screamed no in a very deep guttural way. It wasn't like a loud screech. It was this deep guttural, like, no. And I felt like this bubble around me. And then I just felt the impact. And then the side airbag went, the front airbag went. Nothing touched me. It was like I was in this bubble. Nothing touched me. And time slowed down. And I had the wherewithal to grab my bag and my phone that were next to me and go out the passenger side. And my car was in kind of the middle. The thing is, like, the 18-wheeler had went over and parked on the side of the road. And when I got out of the car, I was confused because there was an SUV right up against my car. Like right up against my car. And I hadn't put two and two together that it wasn't the 18-wheeler that hit me. The 18-wheeler had, the way I slid, the car behind me slid from the right-hand lane right in the middle. And it was like we all packaged each other. It's like, because that car slid, it actually pushed my car away. The SUV was right here, and the 18-wheeler actually hit the SUV, but it scraped it. So we all sort of scraped each other, but slid each other. I mean, my car was totaled. Her car was, the person in the SUV's car was totaled. I ended up in the truck bed with the trucker until the police got there. And then when I got out of the truck bed, I just was like, this is where my memory's a little fucked. Okay. No. Before I got into the truck bed, I had to make sure the girl in the car was okay because she wouldn't get out of her car because her animals were in the car. And I was trying to get her out of the car because 18-wheeler guys, like truckers, they don't stop. Even if they're on a time crunch. So they were like barreling down the left lane before anybody could get there. So on this ice, we're all in the middle of the road, and these 18-wheelers are just barreling by because they're on a time crunch. They don't give a fuck. They're in an area like that they punch through. Like Wyoming is the way that Wyoming's set up is like a pretty open state, and you go 80 miles an hour. Like the speed posted limit is 80. And they didn't care if there was ice or snow. They're going 80 miles an hour. So they're going 80 past us while we're on the highway. And I'm trying to get this girl out because in my mind, I've been in accidents before. I've helped through accidents before. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I've got to get her out of this car because if they're going 80, somebody's going to do something stupid and slide and kill her. And she's like, no, I can't get out of my car because my cats are in here. I was like, no, you got to get out of her car. Behind her car was her parents because she was moving across the country. And then when I got out, went into the truck bed and waited with the trucker, I got out of the truck bed and I noticed that the highway had been blocked off. And I swear to God, this is God. Another 18-wheeler, which I had saw in my mind's eye. It didn't happen in front of us. It happened behind us. And I don't know, like, the full trajectory of everything, had jackknifed across the highway. So he was so stuck in a jackknife position, nobody could get past. So it blocked us off from any cars racing past the accident. And then I noticed that next to my car, a pickup truck got stuck in the snowdrift because I guess they had slid trying to get away from, they were trying, I guess, I don't know their story, but so basically the accidents were these separate accidents, but they were all in that same pocket. And ultimately I got caused as the fault, or I got told I was the fault of it, which sucked, but we got through it. And canceled my tour, obviously, because I lost my home. That was my home. That car was my home. But what I ultimately learned, and unfortunately I don't have any pictures anymore because I erased all of them because, I have all the paperwork from my insurance agency, and I really just didn't want the pictures on my phone or on my computer anymore. I just wanted them to I wanted to leave that behind me. But ultimately, like, the sacrifice of a comic is like, that's the piece of the journey that people don't see, and at the same time, I'm getting hate from people from that show that are fans sending me, like, I think somebody said that they really wanted to punch me in the face. So try, like, one of the things was, Medicine Bow, Wyoming is where the accident took place. And I want to say that day was one of the most synchronistic days of my life. I remember seeing an eagle circling. Obviously, he was probably looking for, like, things to eat, but, like, there was an eagle circling above, which I've only seen eagles a couple times in the wild. And I felt like a native energy around me. And when I looked at like the area and the history and started reading about the area and what Medicine Bow, Wyoming means and what those mountains mean, the deep native history and the deep history of exploitation, and how books were written about that highway, and how, I made the promise to share the story of the Highway 80 and how it did exploit the people of, the indigenous tribes and also people who were enslaved in the United States who were made to create highways around the United States. Basically slave labor contributed to making that highway. And I said, when I can and when it's time to share that story, like this is probably a bigger story than, anything here. And there's probably a deep meaning to this as well. The kind people at Crossroads Towing of Medicine Bow, Wyoming, who took me under their wing and basically gave me a place to sleep that night in one of their apartments. They had like a little apartment for hunters and people that were traveling because there were a lot of people that went to hunt out in that area. They have antelope and a bunch of other animals that, hunters go get antlers for. And I was stuck in that area for a couple of days because it was the pandemic. And they had to bring a car up from Denver from Enterprise so that I could have a rental car. And I had to make that decision overnight to go back to my home state of Maryland, where I'm from, which wasn't easy because, at the time I had stepped back from like what COVID is on a very political scale. Trigger warning, I have very different views of what all this shit is. But my family, were in the category of the people that get it. And so I was basically knew that once I got back to Maryland that I would be quarantined into a basement. So whether people see that as traumatic or not, from somebody who's extremely independent and on their own to, only being allowed in a basement for a good amount of days, and had been completely on my own in the car for so long. And so I was in Laramee, Wyoming for a couple of days waiting for a car in a hotel and really had to reassess my life. And even when I was in the truck bed during the car accident, all I could think of was like, oh gosh, like maybe I made the wrong decision to be a comic. Maybe this is my punishment for being a comedian. How dare I think I could ever do something like this? Like all the terrible thoughts that somebody in the darkness of their soul thinks about, why did I even live? Like why, and knowing that this was something that I was going to have to get some trauma therapy over. And I had gotten something called EMDR, which I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend for people. And, that led me to the East Coast for a while, but my whole journey is a long journey, and it's still going. I eventually went from Maryland back to LA. LA changed some rules that I didn't really comply with, so I moved back to Texas, eventually got my own apartment in Texas, and then ended up back on the road because ultimately my goal was to reset my life and get back on the road again. And I did. And I ended up in LA again. And now I'm in Maryland as I record this. So this is a long journey. The comedy journey is not for the faint of heart. And I will say, my experience that I had with my car accident was a near-death experience. I didn't go up into the angels and it was a near-death experience where I was basically, I've been questioning this for a couple of years and I don't have a lot of answers other than, for some reason, the divine God, universe, goddess sees that I still have a purpose on this planet, even though sometimes it's really hard for me to see. And obviously with like the Kill Tony fans, I'm sure they would have been happier if I died, to be quite honest. And I'm being extremely honest. They thrive off of that. They live off of that. They live off of seeing people, I don't know, like once you kind of really see it for what it was, because I was like in the middle of like trauma, like sweating when I was driving and things like that, and like getting messages from these guys, and it's like, wow, like what does society want from women? You know, you're damned if you speak up for yourself, and sure as hell if you don't speak up for yourself, then you're just walked all over. So it's like these kinds of things that really I have a lot of questions about. And obviously this is a vlog for me to kind of get out this part of the story, but the story isn't done yet. I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep building from here with stand-up comedy. And that's why I have an ongoing vlog series called Rewriting Absolutely Everything, because Camel So Strong is really just this journey during the pandemic, but Rewriting Absolutely Everything is me just trying to find my voice from a perspective of being in comedy for 10 years and really not having a lot to show to show for it. I have, done all this stuff behind the scenes, but if you look at me on paper, or if you look at me on, what a comic's supposed to have, which is like a big audience and things like that, I don't have that. I build from the ground up, and this is rebuilding from the ground up, where, my 10-year anniversary was June 13th of this year, and the ups and downs that come along with that, and trying to accept myself through, where I'm at in it right now. So I hope you enjoyed Camel So Strong. This is episode 4, and it's the final episode of this particular series. It's a labor of love. I fucking love this shit. But at the same time, it's also very isolating and lonely, and sometimes you're live streaming in random places in the country. So thank you guys. I really appreciate for those who watched, and, judge it for yourself. Like, ask yourself what your journey is. Obviously, one of my biggest things that happened during the pandemic was what happened with Kill Tony. But the biggest thing was this car accident that really did change my perspective in life. And still to this day, I think about the meaning of it a lot. So thank you guys. I'm Kristy Belich, and take care. Okay, here I am. I don't know if this is the official video. It is straight up. I just shook hands with a man named Justice, so it is time. I have my car about to go on the road.